Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and it is my honor to serve as the Minister of Religious Education. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you are carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. I welcome you to our worship service by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words today were written by Karen G. Johnston. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into the enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling up from the past that must fully come into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. It is good we gather.
Sometimes what feels like an ending can also be a beginning. And sometimes it can be hard to see the beginning part when you're really hurting from the ending part. About a dozen years ago, the marriage I was a part of came to an end. We had been a family, a dad, a mom, a son, and a daughter, but the husband and wife part, that had to end. Divorce is never easy, not for anyone, not for the parents, and not for the children. And it was hard for me. I had thought we would always be a family, and when that changed, I didn't know how to live that way. A lot of things changed, and they changed quickly. It took me a long time to catch up with some of those changes. One thing that changed was that I started to be a parent on my own. With my kids, I was still their dad, but when it came to being their parent, I was on my own and not part of a team anymore. At first, this was scary and hard, but after a while, I started to realize I could do things the way I thought they should be done. I realized I could make my own choices about what I thought was best for my kiddos. One of those choices led me to this church. Before, their mom and I had been raising them with no religion at all. Neither she nor I really belonged to any church or practiced any religion, so it made sense to raise our children the same way. But a thought came to me, and I realized that raising them with no religion was kind of the same thing as raising them with a religion. Where by raising them without any religion, we had been making the choice for them just as much as we would have been making the choice for them if we'd raised them Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or Hindu or any religion. I wanted my kiddos to be able to make their own choices about their lives, to choose one faith or another, or none at all. I knew a little bit about this church and about Unitarian Universalism, and I knew that Unitarians tried to learn about many religions and tried to be okay with people having their own beliefs. We say to seek the truth in love. So I signed my son and daughter up for RE classes, and I started coming to First Church myself. I took some classes myself here to learn about UUism, and I became an official member. Because I'm a teacher, I volunteered to teach RE classes. And in those classes, my son and daughter saw some friends they already knew from their school, and they made a few new friends too. Some of them are still friends today. And I told my son and my daughter why I wanted them to go to RE classes. It was the thing I said earlier. I wanted them to have good information that would help them make their own decisions about religion in their own lives. And they did. At one point, one of them said, I believe in Jesus, but I also believe in Poseidon and Hades too. The other one told me that they were pretty sure there were no gods, not for real. They had made up their minds, and they still do to this day. I'm proud of them for that, and I'm grateful to this church and all the people who help them learn to make their own decisions. I don't know how things would have turned out if their mom and I had not gotten divorced. Maybe my children would have learned to make their own choices about religion, and maybe not. But that's not what happened. Instead, this is what happened. And I'm glad it did. The three of us, my daughter, my son, and me, we came here to this place. We talked to each other about what we believe and what was important to us. We met people to talk to and share ideas and disagreements with. Together we came to this place, and from there we each went our own different ways. But those differences, and our talks about those differences, kept us connected. They didn't separate us. The family we had been changed, and the three of us found new ways to be a family. And First Church was one of those ways. It was hard to see it at the time. Divorce often comes with a lot of sadness and some pain. But that ending was the beginning of a new part of our lives. This part. And I'm glad we have this part. I really am.
This story was originally researched and then told by Roger Bregman in the Guardian newspaper in May of 2020. In the 1950s, 6 students at a Catholic school in Tonga, which is an island country in the Pacific Ocean, decided that school was boring and they were going to escape. They packed some bananas and coconuts and a small gas stove and asked to borrow the fishing boat of a man they did not like very much. The 6 boys, whose names were Sion, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke, and Mano, ages 13 to 16, planned to sail through the ocean from Tonga to Fiji or maybe New Zealand. They set sail at dusk one evening when no one was paying attention. When they hit the open water that night, the sea was calm and the boys fell asleep. When they woke up, however, later, they were in the middle of a terrible storm with water crashing over the edges of their boat and their sail ripped and their rudder broken. They were terrified. Luckily, they survived that storm, but after it was over, they had no way to steer or sail their boat. None of them had even packed a map or a compass. They just drifted for 8 days across the water. They ate everything that they had with them, and they caught rainwater and coconut shells. When the food was gone, they had nothing left, and each boy just took one drink of rainwater from the coconut shell every morning and every night. Then, finally, on the 8th day, they saw a miracle on the horizon in front of them, land. The boys cheered and celebrated and worked really hard together to get the boat there and scramble up to safety. But the land wasn't really safe. Today, people call the island those boys landed on uninhabitable. That means it isn't a place that people can live. It was mostly rock, and some of the rock was 1,000 feet high. But the boys worked together to make it a place that they could live. Slowly, they grew a garden. They figured out how to build a fire, which was really hard because all they had with them was a knife, and starting a fire from rocks and a knife is really, really hard. But once they got the fire started, they took shifts tending to it so that it never went out. For more than a year, every day, day and night, the boys took shifts and kept the fire going. They also took shifts tending the garden and working in the kitchen and guarding their camp. They fed one another and protected one another, took care of each other's bodies. But these boys, as they lived together, learned to take care of each other's hearts and spirits too. Sometimes they argued, but whenever they did, they managed it by having whoever was arguing take time out. They tended to each other, body and soul. Every day they started the day and ended it by singing and saying a prayer together. One really scary day, their bonds were tested. Stephen was climbing out on the rocks and he slipped. He fell off of a high cliff and he was hurt badly. But his band of brothers carefully climbed down the cliff and found their way to him. And then they worked together and figured out how to carry Stephen to safety. They discovered that his leg was broken. And somehow the boys figured out how to set a broken leg in the wilderness. They gathered sticks and leaves, and they used those to set Stephen's leg. It was really scary, having one of their small group down and not able to help anymore. And it was scary for Stephen to have a broken leg and not be able to take care of himself in the wilderness. But his friends told him not to worry. They would take care of him while he healed, which slowly but surely he did. His broken leg healed perfectly. Eventually, a fisherman sailing by this sole island in the middle of the sea noticed that there were burned patches in the middle of the green on the side of those rocky cliffs. The fisherman thought that was strange because no people were supposed to have lived on this island for more than 100 years, and it's pretty rare for fires to start on their own in tropical islands. So the fisherman, whose name was Peter, took out a pair of binoculars and he looked a little more closely at this island to try to see what was going on. And then he saw it. There was a boy with long hair down to his waist, leaping off of a cliff into the water. And then there were 5 more boys who jumped after the first boy into the water. Peter sailed to the island to check it out. And as the boys watched the boat approach, they knew they were finally being rescued. They had survived for 15 months on their own on a deserted island that didn't have any food or water or shelter beyond what they were able to catch or build or grow. And together, cooperating, they learned how to catch and build and grow what they needed to live because they had each other, their chosen family, and that was enough to survive. The 6 boys, Sion, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke, and Mano, and the fisherman, Peter, remained chosen family for the rest of their lives. The boys ended up working on the fisherman's boat as the crew and became men there, using all the survival skills and powers of cooperation and bonds of love to sail all over the ocean, just like they had dreamed of. And when they were old men, they still lived one another, friends, family, forever.
Do you know where your grandparents grew up? Do you know where your parents went to high school? Do you know a story in your family about something really terrible happening, like an illness or a fire? Do you know how they got through it? Too often, our family stories of struggle are not shared. Perhaps initially, this is because the grief is so poignant, and those who have struggled are weary and sad. And our culture, it tends to encourage us to move on, not to linger on anything bad or uncomfortable, perhaps out of fear of inviting in more bad fortune or encouraging victimhood. We are clearly taught from a young age to look forward and to keep on keeping on. The family focus becomes the hope and the promise of the next generation, because every parent who has ever held their child for the first time has the wish in their heart that nothing bad ever happened to them. But of course, that is not possible. So, what is the next best thing that we can do to give our families, chosen and inherited, to give our children the strength, the will, the resilience to embrace life and all of its loveliness and ugliness? The answer is surprisingly simple. Tell the hard stories, like the ones you have heard here today. Stories of struggle, confusion, being lost, feeling alone, and then reconnecting with our people and finding our way to new places. Dr. Marshall Duke and Dr. Robin Favouche are professors of psychology at Emory University, and they have been researching the qualities of resilience in families and children for decades. The doctors have done this by tracking dinner conversations, asking those "do you know" questions that I began with, and testing the children's psychological health over the years. The evidence is overwhelming. Knowing your family's story makes you more competent. Understanding your roots gives you a stronger sense of self, of purpose, and resilience to continue, even when life does not seem to make very much sense. During this pandemic, life certainly has made less sense. Early in our isolation, my family was grasping for anchors in the new unknown. An old story was dusted off, one that was almost forgotten about my Grandma June, who spent her whole life in Racine, Wisconsin. When my child asked, "Has this ever happened to us before?" I thought I remembered a story about her being sick and locked in a house. Maybe it was flu, I thought, or could it have been the smallpox? I didn't know. I had to call my father to double check. "Isn't there a family story about how Grandma was locked in her house as a little girl?" I asked him. "Yes," he said. He had almost forgotten too. "It was scarlet fever outbreak," he told me. "It's a bacterial illness that can develop in people who have strep throat. Nowadays, we just treat strep with antibiotics before it gets that bad, but at that time, isolation was how it was controlled. So she was locked in the house with her mother and her siblings. Her father, my father's grandfather, had to crawl in and out of the bedroom window and leave them food every night on the front door." That story did somehow help. They had had it worse. They had gotten through it. We could too. We humans need story. We tell stories to give life experience shape. The narrative organizes our story into a beginning, a middle, heroes and situations, solutions, and endings. Stories help us connect the landscape of our consciousness with the landscape of action, integrating our internal world into our external world. Doctors Marshall Duke and Robin Favouche have learned that having a family narrative builds an identity inside of us, an intergenerational self. The intergenerational self is created when we internalize the stories, not just of the good things, but especially the hard times that our family has endured. Making sense of our ancestors by examining their lives, lives we are connected to, offers us models on how to endure. Most importantly, they show us how we belong to something bigger than ourselves. The family narrative contains collective wisdom that are tools of stability in a chaotic world. They let us know, like Patrick did in his story today, that sometimes an ending can also be a beginning. They protect our children from anxiety and anger because there are instructions in the plots to keep stretching, learning, to cooperate and grow like boys on a desert island. The most powerful tool we can give our children is the story of ourselves, the ups and downs we endured, retold to them again and again, refined for each generation. The single best predictor of children's emotional health and happiness are having roots in who they are. It shapes their wings, their belief in who they can become. So go be brave and tell the hard stories. May you feel your roots hold you close, grow your wings, and stretch them. You will need them in the wild world before us. Blessed be. Our closing words today are by Kathleen McTeague. It's called They Are With Us Still. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into dust. They have not disappeared. They are with us still. Their lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. Blessed be.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah.